name is Shanta Lee, and I'm here to talk to you about the curatorial practice of living, or to put simply, to curate a life. I'm pretty sure all of us in this room are aware that we're more than just one thing, but you see, I embodied it way longer than I ever could articulate that. When that question would come around when I was a little girl, what do you want to be when you grow up? I had at least 3 different careers before the age of 10. I wanted to nurse, I wanted to teach, I wanted to be a lawyer. I also wanted to be a glamorous adult when I grew up. That was kind of a career option. I carried that spirit of wanting to be and do the many things. So that now when I'm stuffed into a box of one thing, or someone asks me, tell me the one thing you do across the many things, I say, well, we've held different roles. We do hold different roles throughout our lives. We change careers. We go through different changes. We're not even the same person we were 6 months ago. So it's pretty anti-human to be and do one thing. In fact, I was in the midst of doing one of many things when I was asked to be here. I was finishing up a project that involved adding some audio to parts of the Vermont African American Heritage Trail. And I came to Woodstock, Vermont to learn more about 8 African American soldiers who were buried on the River Street Cemetery. They were a part of the 54th Massachusetts Regiment. Now, if that doesn't ring a bell, the 1989 movie Glory will, starring Denzel Washington and Morgan Freeman, that movie was about these soldiers in that regiment. I met with the Woodstock History Center, and while I was just thinking and beating myself up on missing so many gaps in American history, sometime later I got an invitation to be on this stage and to do this talk and share my story with you. And the irony is I wasn't focused on my own creative work, but doing a TEDx or doing a TED was only one of the many things I ever wanted to do. It was 2006, and I was working for Planned Parenthood of Southern New England. As it turns out, in 2006, it was the last affiliate, or one of the last affiliates, to receive a global partnership. We were matched with Uganda. And what was going to happen in that global partnership is they were going to send a small delegation here for a couple weeks, and at some point, we were going to be sending a small delegation to them. I kept thinking to myself, boy, oh boy, I want to have my ear to that wall. I want to be a part of that. I went on vacation, received an email from the CEO and from the head of the public affairs department at the time, and they said they wanted to talk to me when I came back. Now, of course, I thought I was in trouble. If you know anything about me, any of my friends, they know I'm a little bit of a troublemaker. So, of course, I'm like, oh no, what did I do now? Well, I get back, and as it turns out, I was one of the 3 total people chosen to go to Uganda. That was a big deal because it was my first time leaving the country. I'd never been out of the country before that. And it was going to be the first time being away from my husband at the time for 2 weeks. And that wasn't such a big deal, but it was within a very secret marriage. Little did I know, just over a year later, between a year and a half later, I would be navigating my way out of that marriage, stepping into a promotion, graduating with my MBA, my first round of grad school, finishing up research for that MBA, going on to do and be the many and many and many things. I think that was also around the time I had a car that stopped reversing and I had to trade it in and figure all of that out. So I didn't know that a year later I'd be unzipping into being and doing the many things. Some parts very seen, some parts very unseen. You ever stop and think about the meaning or look up the root word curate, what it means, or art for that matter, because we are in the theme of the art of living? So as it turns out, curating, or the word curate, even though we know it related to museums and galleries, it has an archaic definition that is attached to the caretaking of souls. Art, the word, is attached to Old French, Greek, Latin, Sanskrit. It means everything from to fit together to skills, that are gained as a result of practice. So thus it makes sense that to curate a life, to do an artful curation of living, one would be caretaking one's soul. One would be asking the questions of the who, what, when, where, and how in order to figure out how it all fits together. For this, I want you to think a little bit about a soup. You have that one soup, but there are so many ingredients that come together to give you the delicious thing. Think about it in that way. And speaking of soup, I would like to leave you with part of a recipe. We'll start it this way. And think of it in terms of you taking this recipe, you know you might add or subtract a few things extra on your own. 1, curiosity. Always remain curious about your life, even the most difficult moments. Be curious about what is unzipping within and around you. 2, action. Now for this, and I'm maybe kind of giving away, I do watch a lot of movies. Think of any action movie you've ever seen. And usually there's a scene where the individual is riding 2 vehicles at the same time. One is clearly about to crash. The other one is moving forward and towards some desired destination or maybe safety. You will become that individual many times throughout your life before you ever know it. And you have to make a decision, a very strategic decision of when and how to take the most precious cargo off of that vehicle that is about to derail or crash, and also at the same time be boarding this other vehicle that is going forward and toward your desired destination. Number 3, selective listening. You want to shut out the naysayers, the doomsdayers who are the dream slayers. You want to shut out the shooters, the canters, all those people who are so deaf and blind. They can't touch, taste, see, feel, sense. They have no sense of your vision. You will have to literally close your own ears in on yourself and be encased by your vision, unapologetically. I'm going to pause on the recipe. I want to tell you another story. It was 2001. I had just graduated Trinity College, undergrad. I had my first office, and I had to decide what image I wanted to put in that office. I didn't want to put up family pictures. I didn't want one of those cheesy motivational posters. I chose the Taj Mahal. I knew it was in India, didn't have much access or knowledge about the history at that time, but I knew I wanted to see that image every time I opened the door. And I also knew I needed to get to that place. Wasn't sure how. Some years later, I encountered a work of historical fiction on a real-life woman who they say ruled from behind the veil. She also turned out to be the aunt of the woman for whom the Taj Mahal was built. Some years after that, I stayed up all night, lured in by a movie called Kama Sutra, A Tale of Love. And I know exactly what you might be thinking, but there was a character who took these ingredients of curiosity, action, selective listening. She carved her own path, and I was just so drawn and lured in by her. So all those ingredients crushed down to a fine powder, sprinkled across time, plus add another husband, this time not so secret, plus add a car dying on a highway the last day after a 2-year contract that was attached to unzipping communal health citywide in Connecticut. Add all those things, add turning down a job, add so many more things, add the naysayers who ask me, what are you doing going to India for 5 months, no less? Add the lies that I tell people when they say, do you know anyone there? Yes, I do. No, I didn't. That equals living in India for 5 months, plus some extras like dropping out of yoga school in order to go on to take, something like 12,000 highly viable photos. The very first time that I actually stepped into wielding a camera in that way. I want to return back to our soup. And again, as recipes goes, right? You may add a few extras, you may subtract some things, you may substitute some things, you make it your own. 5, be the space. Don't just take up space, be the spaciousness around. 6, engagement. Think very carefully about who, what, when, where, how you're going to engage. I don't care if it's the barista across the counter handing you your coffee. I don't care if you only have a few minutes to pick up the phone and be present. Think about engagement. 6, be the disappeared on your own terms. This is for your rest and this is for your peace. 7, drop the desperation. Now, this one came from comedian Leslie Jones through a clip. You know those clips that are infamous or famous for circulating and getting your attention and stealing like 2 minutes of your time. Well, this was one of those, but this was a good one. And it was a few months ago that I came across it. And she talks about receiving advice from her fellow friend and comedian, Cat Williams, who says, once you drop your desperation, you are going to blow up. This was years ago. He said this to her. And she said, I'm desperate because I'm broke. He said, you're not broke. You just don't have any money, but you got talent. That hit me like a ton of bricks. I went on to do and be the many things. I continued to be voracious about the way that I engaged, that I took up space unapologetically. I appeared and disappeared myself. I took titles. I disappeared titles. I took names. I disappeared names. As I wrap, I want to share 2 final stories with you. One story is about a little girl who imagines, and she was audacious in her imagining and in crafting her life. She was so audacious, in fact, she pulled from many images, and she pulled from things like the sound of music. She closed out all the naysayers along the way, including the biggest naysayer of all being her birth mother. She continued to do and be and go on. And she fought against being jaded with love, but also keeping her heart good and open for the boy who would come along with a whisper to a shout to the spirit of collaboration as he continued to dare her to keep being and doing with his love and support. There's this other little girl. She was a Black little girl who grew up in Hartford, Connecticut. She was born to a mother who was 19 and a father who's 29. And at some point, they all become homeless, bounce around from hotel to hotel, eventually end up living in a basement. At some point, that Black little girl's father goes to a second war. She also earns a nickname from her birth mother as second mother to her autistic brother. At some point, that Black little girl also witnesses her brother being taken away by the Department of Children and Families. She grows up, and she has so many marriages and divorces that either people are going to start placing bets or she's about to rival Elizabeth Taylor if she's not careful. Now, if you knew that last story about me before I hit the stage, would you have taken my recipe? Would you have listened to the recipe? If I started with that story, would you have walked down that path with me? Thank you.